This is still the conversation. Switching gears to Kenya now, where President William Ruto said his administration has been forced to make tough decisions for the nation's sake. Now, speaking on Thursday, that's November 16th, when he opened a two-day national executive retreat at the Edge Convention Center, South Sea, Nairobi, the president said for the country to head in the right direction, not all decisions will please Kenyans. The head of state said his government's focus is long-term and for the greater good of the people, urging his cabinet not to be afraid to make decisions that are in the country's best interest. Now, the retreat comes against the rising cost of living and excessive taxation. And of course, joining me now on the program is Richard Gatheru, a financial engineer, researcher, and of course, Stephen Nduvi, a governance and public policy analyst, both joining from Nairobi, Kenya. Thank you so much for your time, gentlemen.
Thank you.
All right, let me start off with you, of course, Richard. Now, the first question being Kenyans, head of state has actually said that the government's focus is long-term and for the greater good of the people. Now, the president actually did further note that he will not make simple or convenient or popular path for critical growth when it, affects the country. Now, my question to you is this. This strategy sort of infers a blanket approach. Now, is this in the best interest of Kenyans? My question to you is to Richard.
During this conversation, yes, as you rightly put, my name is Richard, and that's a very, very valid question that we can look into. But realistically speaking, from where our economy is, I don't think from my end and from probably my experience in the financial management, I don't think probably Kenya is at the best in terms of recovery, in terms of our economy. So to some extent, I would say I partly disagree with the sentiment.
All right, Richard, I would like to, of course, direct that question to George Kimando, who is also joining in, Executive Director, of course, joining in also from Nairobi. What is your take concerning the assertive yet long-term reform strategy by President William Ruto?
I will be very frank about this, of course. Many things are happening in Kenya today. One thing is that I agree completely that we need to have very, very profound measures taken to right the economy and put it back on the economic growth that we need as a country. But if you allow me, I'll tell you this. Many Kenyans, by the way, are agreed that those measures that are being taken are essential. But their concern is raised on three main issues. Number one is, are we going to have the resources that are being gotten together by the government through taxations and all those measures? Is there going to be a prudent use of those resources? Because many Kenyans are agreed, we were at a bad spot, right? Fine, these measures, we were to take them at some point, right? And I think it's just as good that the president was very candid that we must take those strenuous measures, but then can we trust him to do the right thing? In fact, that's a question that is in the minds of many Kenyans, as we are now.
Can you trust the president to do the right thing? I mean, that's a really, really, well, I say strong notion there. Are we looking at a problem of trust right now between the people? I mean, are you inferring a problem, an issue of trust between the people and, of course, the government of Kenya, particularly the president?
I'll be very frank with you. Kenya, coming from a history that we have been in, like now the last regime, and the one that was previously there between 1978 and 2002, whereby Kenyans are led to what we call a wild goose chase. You are whipped towards a certain agenda, but that agenda is not met. After the campaigns, that's the end of the promises. Then the narrative changes. So, as I was telling you, this government, number one, because of what we have come through as a country, faces a serious trust deficit, a serious one, coming from the history. And that is where the current president, I think he may be good in his intention, but he's been told, come on, we've been there before. So what is this thing that you're going to do differently? And already, if you listen to what like now the opposition is the jab they're throwing at him is like, you made so many promises to the campaigns. Why are you not achieving them? Why are we with your promises? So even if he's doing the right thing and his intentions are right, he needs to act very decisively in gaining back the trust of Kenyans, which I think, in my view, there are three things that he needs to do. But those ones I may need to discuss in about a minute, if you give me some more time.
Of course. I mean, we'll get to those three things because you've actually raised a serious concern here. And of course, I want to believe that when it comes to social contract between the people and the government, trust plays a pivotal role. But I'll come back to you, George. Let me go to Stephen right now. Now, there are issues of rising cost of living and excessive taxation. Is the government's approach in tackling these particular problems promising?
Thank you, host, for giving me this opportunity. My name is Stephen Nyamu from Kenya. I'm a governance and a policy analyst. Just dwell into the previous question so that I connect it to your current question on the cost of living and the taxation. I believe His Excellency the President of the Republic of Kenya, President William Ruto, is taking a radical policy shift in order to turn around the economy. So, for me, I agree. In the context here as a country, of course, currently on the issues of given that they are just one, the government is just one in office, the Kenya Kwanza government, and given the prevailing conditions, both the domestic political dynamics and the external political dynamics, they have a lot of influence on what informs government policy decisions. So, given in that context, the president is just 1 year in office. I think from the point where I see the government has the leeway to make, it can either continue to implement the policies that were implemented by the previous regime, or in their interest, based on their manifesto, which is based on the 5 key pillars, they can take strategic moves that really redirect the government, of course, in line with the leadership of His Excellency President Ruto. So, just to point out the issues on the cost of living and the high taxation, I think that is brought about by the issues of budget deficit, which is a key dilemma for the current government. And given the fact that we have external shocks, like the depreciation of the Kenya shilling against the dollar, which is currently affecting the magnitude of the public debt. Of course, currently it's around, in fact, beyond 60%. So that means a lot of money is going to servicing the existing debt, and the government has the obligation, to find ways to raise taxes. But of course, at the same time, the government should be able to, find ways or a mix of policies that really does not harm the welfare of the common humanity, because the current economic model for the government is better. The better that economic model that focuses on the Wanchiku or the low-income earners. So I should point out that one, the government needs to, instead of a radical shift in the policy dimensions that it is taking in key areas of operations. Those policies should be implemented gradually. And then on the cost of living, because that touches especially on the fuel levy, the 16% taxation, I think there is, because fuel is the engine of the economy. When you increase the cost of fuel, then that implies that we are likely.
I'm sorry, Stephen. I might just need to leave you just for a second. I would like to go, of course, back to George. You said there are three issues as regards trust. Now, I would like to also, you to respond by giving those three issues and also respond to this. Now, the president has actually defended his excessive travel expenses, which he claims, is yielding economic results. Of course, this has come under heavy criticisms, from Kenyans themselves. Now, what's your reaction to this? And also, I would also like you to, conclude your line of thought on the trust deficit.
The three things that I thought that the government needs to put in place, which is doing very badly in, if you ask me, are three things actually. Number one is the issue of their claims that has been made at a very high level, in fact, from the presidency itself, that a lot of money that was in our treasury was stolen by people who are known and stored in offshore accounts, monies that were borrowed by those who were in government in the last regime and even before, that went into private pockets that are known. So number one is the issue of going after those who have gotten that money illegally, illicitly, and have that money replenished back to the country's economy. That's number one. They need to put up or to demonstrate that they're serious about recovery of those resources, especially money that has been stashed in offshore accounts. Number two is the issue of corruption. And if you listen to many Kenyans, the point is, if corruption was bad in the last regime, it cannot be good in this current regime. And we already are seeing very questionable cases, like where a cabinet secretary, a minister that is in government, who was appointed a year ago, today he can afford a home in Dubai worth about to 60 million Kenyan shillings. Or a CS who was appointed just about the same time, all of a sudden they control huge sachets of money. We cannot talk about corruption if there is not demonstrable willingness and need to curb it. That's number two. Number three, and also equally important, and that actually may flow into what you're asking about the people who, the budget of travel. Number three is the issue of government extravagance. We cannot talk about the government or the president asking people to tighten their belts, granted, and then he looks like the government's belt is loosened to accommodate more. It cannot be. And much as we agree that, and flowing to what you asked about the travel regiments, the truth of the matter is this: if there are going to be returns that are demonstrable, whether in the immediate, short, mid, or long term, that's okay. Like in any marketing strategy, we have to put resources, but what are the returns for this? So, and that ties up with that point I raised about government extravagance. You cannot, just like even in a home, if you're the head of the home, like a man, for instance, you cannot tell your family that we are going through a rough time, we need to tighten up our belts, we may cut on some dishes like meat or travel, something like that. Yet you, as the head of the family, are not doing it. In fact, you are out there having fun and all that. So the government is facing that double speak. That on one hand, you're asking us to tighten our belts, but on your side, from all we are seeing, there's too much wastage and extravagance around you, especially around the executive. And that also applies to what you asked about the travel issue. So we are not complaining about the travel, but what are the returns? Can we avoid the wastage?
All right. These are deep-rooted questions, which, of course, the president actually did defend, saying that it's yielding some sort of economic dividend. But I'd like to go to you, Richard, because we are pressed for time. Now, the opposition has indicated it will reject the National Dialogue Committee report should it fail to address the high cost of living. I mean, particularly in the country now, Azimio leaders, for instance, say unless the Financial Act of 2023 is repealed, the cost of living will be unbearable for many Kenyans. Now, what's your reaction and position on this, Richard?
Thank you so much. So on the issue of taxation here in Kenya, and I agree with the two speakers actually who just spoken, Kenyans don't have an issue with paying taxes. But the question Kenyans are asking is, are these taxes going into the right use? Because if Kenyans are paying taxes and our health systems are working, the education sector is working, I don't think Kenyans would be complaining. And actually, regarding that question about the Finance Act 2023, and it's true that the government, there was a Finance Act that was introduced. And if we check on the taxation, one, they introduced a withholding tax of 5% that's supposed to be paid relating to the digital content monetization. And then the Act also amended the income tax by introducing something we call the digital asset tax. And the rate is at 3%. That is supposed to be deducted by a person who owns a platform or facilities. So if you look at some of these taxation that has been introduced, I think Kenyans to some extent are pressed to the limit. And I'm looking at it from a point of the ease of doing business in Kenya.
Okay.
If probably the focus is on the medium, the small and medium enterprise,
okay.
Who probably are the greatest contributor when it comes to taxation. If probably the ease of doing business is not going to be addressed, then I feel Kenya is not on the right track in terms of recovery. Okay. And it's true that during the campaign and the election campaign, Ruto promised, the president promised to fix the economy. Okay. And true, the economy was afflicted with corruption and ineptitude. And one of the promises that he made was that he was to entrench good governance.
All right,
and
Richard.
place the poor at the center of the economic policy.
All right, Richard. Richard, thank you so much for your contribution there. But at this point, we need to close the curtains on the program right now. Well, a gentleman, Richard Gatheru, financial engineer and also researcher, and also Stephen Nduvi, governance public policy analyst, and George Kimando, Executive Director, Tunza Kenya Initiative. Gentlemen, thank you so much for your time.